It is a scene many Americans are struggling to make sense of. Chain link fences, cages, temporarily holding more than 1,000 immigrants, many of them children, here in McAllen, Texas, at the Central Processing Center, one of America's largest immigration processing facilities. Men, women, and children wrapped in Mylar blankets as a means to stay warm. This 1-minute, 34-second video, along with these images, released today by U.S. Customs and Border Protection, are among the few visuals we have that provide a glimpse into America's immigration crisis currently unfolding along the southern border. We just finished a tour inside the facility, and it was really almost overwhelming. Yesterday, I was a part of a group of journalists permitted inside that center, but our own cameras were not allowed. There was a lot of people, men held in one part of the facility, boys in another section, and then there were moms with their children in another part of the facility. This is the center we were allowed to see. For many detainees, it is the first stop after being apprehended. Some families could be separated here or at another facility. It is images like these that have now become a flashpoint in the Trump administration's zero-tolerance policy, calling for parents and their children to be separated if the parents have crossed the border illegally. And now, in a recording first obtained by ProPublica, you can hear the desperate sobbing of children from one day last week. Tell us how you got a hold of this recording that purports to be audio of kids being separated from their parents.
Well, you can listen to it, and it's pretty clear what it is. I know the whistleblower. The whistleblower was just horrified by the sound of the children weeping, as is everybody else, and made a recording of it, and came to me for legal advice and asked me if I would forward it to Ginger Thompson of ProPublica and release it to the public, and I've done so.
Customs and Border Protection has declined to comment on this audio because much of what's happening is playing out in closed-door facilities across the almost 2,000-mile border. We're relying on the first-hand accounts of people who have experienced these centers to give us a snapshot of this crisis. Antar Davidson worked as a counselor at Estrella del Norte, a government-contracted shelter in Tucson, Arizona.
These were 3 Brazilian siblings who had been separated from their mother the night prior. They were the 2 younger siblings were holding the older brother for support, and he was crying. I said to him at this point, I said, "Bro, you need to be strong. I know this is difficult, but you need to kind of be strong for your siblings." And he looks at me with tears streaming in his face, and he says, "How can I be strong? I don't know where my mom is. Look at my siblings. I can't do anything. They're trying to separate us." To which I could only respond by putting my head down.
The idea that the kids and parents are being ripped apart permanently is horrific. It's scary. It's devastating, and it also has enormous impacts in terms of the health of children and their ability to become healthy adults.
Dr. Colleen Kraft is the president of the American Academy of Pediatrics.
As a pediatrician, I know what it takes to build child health. I know what it takes to disrupt child health. And I was seeing in front of me the health of these children being disrupted by the removal of the one constant, the one person in their life who could help to shelter them during times of crisis and trial.
In April, she visited a shelter in the Rio Grande Valley of Texas that houses children.
With very young children, we know that the brain does most of its development between birth and 3 years of age. And so a day of separation there is like a week to a month of separation for those of us who are older. So the worst things happen to the youngest children. Most developmental delay happens in that age group.
It is the emotional imagery of children that has moved many to feel outraged. This now famous photo was taken by Getty photographer John Moore.
I spoke with the mother very briefly. I asked her where she came from, and she said she had come with her daughter from Honduras, and they'd been traveling a whole month.
He's been covering immigration for 10 years and wrote the book Undocumented: Immigration and the Militarization of the United States-Mexico Border.
I only had a few seconds to get down on a child's level. I photographed from the ground, and I think I took maybe 7 pictures while she was crying and looking up at her mother, who was being searched by a guard. And it was very hard for me to see as a father.
Today in Brownsville, Texas, members of Congress toured the Casa de Presidente Children's Center.
What do you want people to know about what you saw in there and what it means about this issue overall?
Well, I think it goes back to the fact that, you know, in the last month or so, the United States government, through this administration, has initiated a policy to take kids away from their parents. It's not right, it's immoral, it's inhumane, and we need to stop that.
Protests across the country have echoed this sentiment.
So this is one of the groups of protesters that are outside the facility here in McAllen, and they're saying, no están solos, telling the people inside that they're not alone.
All four living former first ladies have strongly opposed separating families. Laura Bush penned an op-ed in the Washington Post yesterday, writing, quote, "I live in a border state. I appreciate the need to enforce and protect our international boundaries, but this zero-tolerance policy is cruel, it is immoral, and it breaks my heart." First Lady Melania Trump also recently commented publicly on the issue, saying, quote, "She hates to see children separated from their families and hopes both sides of the aisle can finally come together to achieve successful immigration reform. She said we need to be a country that follows all laws, but also a country that governs with heart." President Trump today staunchly defended his administration's immigration policy.
The United States will not be a migrant camp, and it will not be a refugee holding facility. Won't be.
At a conference today for the National Sheriff's Association, DHS Secretary Kirstjen Nielsen offered no apologies.
To a select few in the media, Congress, and the advocacy community, I'd like to start with a message for you. This department will no longer stand by and watch you attack law enforcement for enforcing the laws passed by Congress.
She doubled down at the White House press briefing today.
We have some of the highest detention standards in the country. Claiming these children and their parents are treated inhumanely is not true.
Have you seen the photos of children in cages? Have you heard the audio clip of these children wailing that just came out today?
I have not seen something that came out today, but I have been to detention centers. And again, I would reference you to our standards. I would reference you to the care provided, not just by the Department of Homeland Security, but by the Department of Health and Human Services when they get to HHS.
But is that the image of this country that you want out there, children in
The image
cages?
that I want of this country is an immigration system that secures our borders and upholds our humanitarian ideals.
Over the weekend, former Trump chief strategist Steve Bannon appeared on This Week.
We ran on a policy, very simply, to stop mass illegal immigration and limit legal immigration, get our sovereignty back, and to help our workers, okay? And so he went to a zero-tolerance policy. Zero tolerance, it's a crime to come across illegally, and children get separated.
And as the fight rages on, and with policymakers at odds, it is the experience of those detained children that is of greatest concern. For Nightline, I'm Marcus Moore in McAllen, Texas.